Hello, my paranormal peeps. Welcome back to another paranormal podcast. This is Matt Harvey. I am the founder and lead investigator with Deep Woods Paranormal. We also have a YouTube channel and we do this podcast sometimes 3 times a week, sometimes 2 times a week, depending on what's going on. Recently, we've been just slammed with life and unfortunately not able to take the time to sit down and do a podcast. So I apologize for that. We are still going. Our plan is to continue to do podcasts and actually maybe add another day or two of the week with more podcasts. So you'll get 5 days a week of podcasts. Anyways, so a lot of people have asked me, Matt, do ghosts only come out at night? Maybe some places, but not everywhere. I've had multiple encounters over the last 46 years with spirits during or ghosts during the day. Yeah, they're active whenever they're active. I don't think they wait till we go to sleep to become active. Some may, but not all. I do believe that, in the last house we lived in, we had stuff going on all the time. We documented footsteps, we documented a shadow, we documented all this stuff, all happening during the day while we were gone at work. And the cameras were just documenting all this stuff, and the poor dogs were reacting to it. But nothing ever tried to hurt them or scare them. They just, sometimes our lab, who unfortunately now has crossed that rainbow bridge, would react. And she would bark, 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 bark. And it's like, what is she barking at? And then she'd bark her way into a corner. And I have to physically go pick her up. An 80-pound dog. I have to go pick this 80-pound dog up and bring her back out into the other room so she wasn't afraid anymore. So, yeah, the fact that people say, oh, well, ghosts only come out at night. I think a lot of the times what happens is, if you're on a normal schedule and you work in the morning through the evening, early evening, you get home, you make yourself dinner or something to eat, and then you probably watch TV or hang out and watch internet or whatever you want to do, and then you go on to going to bed. You wind down, you go to bed, you go to sleep, and our brains, even though they shut down quite a bit, some people's brains or ears are still on a higher alert level than others. I know Amanda has really good hearing. My hearing is diminished, unfortunately, over the years due to trucking and being around a lot of loud sounds. So that said, like I said, I've had encounters at all times of the day and night. I think what happens is people are, when they go to bed, they're a little bit more aware or awake than they think. Sometimes spirits will use that to try and communicate with them, be it a loved one, be it something that's in the house. Maybe it needs attention, maybe it needs help, maybe it wants to tell you something like that. But a lot of people are, when we go to bed, usually the TV's off, the internet's off, everything's been turned off. Everything that makes noise is usually turned off, so it's a lot quieter. Now during the day, there could be a bunch of noises going on, and there could be things happening that you just don't hear or don't see or whatever, because you're busy doing whatever you're doing. So at night, when things slow down, things are a little bit more quiet, those noises you were hearing during the day sometimes continue on to the evening. And all of a sudden you've got some kind of activity going on, and you're like, hey, wait. Your ears perk up and your eyes get a little wider, and you're like, what is that? And sometimes that activity is a little scarier, like doors opening and closing, or cabinet doors opening and closing, footsteps, hearing a voice, maybe seeing an apparition, stuff like that. So anyways, I believe that ghosts come out at all times of the day and night. I don't think there's any set time for them to be out. The spirits that are in this room may agree with that. I'm going to leave a pause here and let them interject if they want to. All right, Ghost, go ahead. I'll sit back. I'll let you have the mic. Okay. Well, we'll listen back and see if we hear anything on that. If we do, maybe we'll break it down another time. All right. So another theory that somebody asked me about: are only old buildings haunted, or are new buildings haunted as well? We've had cases in the past where we've gone out to locations, and this lady, brand new house in California, and she saw an apparition walk from one side of the house through a wall and disappear. And then she had other activity too. She was hearing voices, footsteps, and like all kinds of other stuff, all times of the day and night. And so, yeah, I know old buildings tend to hold energy. I mean, if you go into a location and you create some kind of energy, that energy stays for a while. If it doesn't stay forever, when older buildings around, and there's a lot of old buildings out here in Texas, which is really exciting because there's like so many options to go knock on somebody's door and say, hey, I'm a paranormal investigator. I'd love to come in and see if you have any ghosts. But these older buildings, they've been around since, Texas was founded. Well, I'm just talking about this area, not in general buildings. But in this area, these buildings have been around since the 1840s or before. Some of them had structures there before that were torn down to be rebuilt. So they're built on top of land where there was already a structure. Some of these buildings are built on places where there was some kind of, burial ground or something like that. I mean, if you think about it, people have died all over this world. There's been billions of people that have lived on this earth. There's not very many places where somebody hasn't really died. So old buildings seem to hold that energy. And when you go in there and you start talking to them, or even renovating a location, cleaning up, putting in new stuff, it seems to draw that energy out. And I think that's why older buildings kind of get more attention sometimes than newer buildings. But when you go and you start cleaning things up, you start repainting, you clean up the floors, you start to remodel, you may be tapping into that old energy. And if there's something intelligent there, they may not be happy with what you're doing. And it's like, no. This is just my place. And we're still, we want it this way still. A lot of the people that restore old buildings tend to restore them to what they look like or similar to what they look like before, which is great. So people can relive that history, which is awesome. But sometimes people remodel it to a more modern or completely change it all together. And that really sparks activity because the entity that's there, or entities that are there, don't like what you changed it to. Now, that can happen in a new building too. I mean, we've investigated so many new buildings. San Juan Capistrano, there was buildings that were built. There were office buildings. They were built on top of Indian burial ground. Now, they did religiously remove the bodies, but there was still that energy there. They were still seeing apparitions of entities, of Indians. And so the more we researched at that location, the more evidence we picked up. I mean, I think we picked up a full body apparition in one thing. I walked through what felt like, they call it ecto, but it was almost like a spider web. I'm right in the middle of the room, and the person in front of me had just walked ahead of me, almost directly ahead of me, and they didn't experience anything. But when I walked through, it was like, oh crap, what the heck? I'm looking around for a spider somewhere, a large spider. And then I realized, oh, sorry, I think I just walked through you. And I apologized to the spirit immediately. But yeah, I mean, that was crazy. And then when we walked out of that room upstairs, started walking down the stairs, and we had a motion detector on the stairs that did you as you walked by. made that chiming noise. And as she walked by it, the first investigator that was with me walked by it, it went off, and it resets in like 2 or 3 seconds. So I gave about 4 or 5 seconds. I then walked past it, and I stopped just past where it was picking up us. And then as we got to the bottom, we walked slowly. It went off a third time, and there was nobody there. So that was strange. Okay, so let's move on to the next thing. Types of haunts. People keep asking me, what's the difference between the types of haunts? So there's residual, there's poltergeist, there's hauntings, there's intelligent hauntings, and then there's demonic. And you're going, okay, so what's the difference between all four of those or all five of those? Residual is just some kind of energy that, again, is trapped at a location. It can be a new location, old location, whatever. I've talked about the lady that called me up and she said, oh my gosh, man, I saw myself walk down the hallway and disappear. And that's just residual energy. It's just because she's walked up and down that hallway so many times. Maybe it was just, she was emotional one of those times, and that created that energy to stay. Emotions can play a lot in residual energy. Somebody was shot. Sometimes people hear gunfire where somebody committed suicide. Sometimes people hear footsteps, but there's no other activity, just footsteps. A lot of the time, residual activity will replay itself around the same time on whatever day it happened, or on an anniversary of that date, the activity may pick up in that location, or it may just happen on a daily basis, no matter what. You might just hear like a train come through, and you're like, wait, there's no train tracks around here, but it sounds like a train just ran through, my living room. There's other types of residual haunts where basically people might see somebody and they might be doing something and they don't pay any attention to what you're doing. They just do their thing and all of a sudden they disappear. So residual is just energy replaying itself. It's not intelligent. It's not, basically, it doesn't know you're there. It's just doing its own thing to essentially, just because it's just like a rerun in history. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Poltergeist. Poltergeist is a German word. It stands for noisy ghosts. Back in Europe, when they used to report sightings or activity in a location, they called it poltergeist activity. Today, that activity, people use that word loosely, but most poltergeist activity, usually there's some kind of water involved. Like the apartment that we lived in Tustin, California, we kept finding pools of water all over the place. It was very strange. The cabinet doors in the little kitchen area were always open. The piano, the old Yamaha piano we had, that would play by itself. So Amanda would sit there, and when I'd be gone, she'd hear it play a couple tunes, couple notes. It was not one of those pianos that plays itself. So that was strange. And the cover was over the keys. So there was no way to physically, for the cat or anything else, to have done it. So poltergeist normally just is something trying to get your attention. It's just being noisy. It's just you've done something to upset it, maybe. And usually it's an intelligent entity. And we'll go into intelligence in a second here. But essentially, it just is something that's going to happen until you get some answers. A lot of the time with poltergeist activity, when we go in, we start asking questions. We ask what's wrong, what's going on, why are you upset, what did they do, what's going on to make you want to do this. Sometimes is they just have a message for somebody. Sometimes they're angry about something. Sometimes they just want attention. They just want the homeowner to acknowledge, or the business owner to let them acknowledge that they're there. A lot of people When they are afraid, they don't acknowledge the paranormal. They just ignore it and act like it never happened and move on. It's just a defense mechanism, which is great. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. But poltergeist activity usually is things like come flying out of the cupboards, drawers open on their own. It's usually having to do with stuff moving around on its own. That's basically poltergeist in a nutshell. It's basically things moving on their own for no reason. A lot of the times it doesn't involve entities being seen. Sometimes you can like tapping or knocking or footsteps or other noises, but it usually doesn't involve any kind of essentially any kind of like showing itself. It just basically manifests by making noises and moving stuff. All right, so hauntings. Hauntings, for a place to be haunted, I've already talked about this a lot, but I'll kind of go back into it. For a location to be haunted, there has to be a lot of activity going on a lot of the times. At all times, let's just put it that way. Disembodied voices, people seeing things moving on their own, footsteps, doors, or other objects opening and closing. And that kind of goes with poltergeist a little bit, but hauntings are usually a little bit less severe. Poltergeist activity is more severe. It means that whatever's going on is severely upset and wants something, needs something, or is just unhappy for some reason. Hauntings are more like they're just kind of interacting with you a lot of the time. You might hear somebody say something in your ear. You might see an apparition from time to time. You might hear footsteps, like I said. Things might move around you. And they're just basically letting you know that they're there. And a lot of the time, that has to do with intelligent entities. Now, intelligent just means it's not residual. Intelligent means I can sit there with an audio recorder and ask a question. What's your name? And then wait however long, 20, 30 seconds, and listen back and get Joe, or whatever the entity's name was. Sometimes we'll get a name. What's your favorite color? And it can answer that question. How long have you been here? Are you happy? Have you, are you a loved one? And it basically, if they can answer those questions, even use a spirit box, so they can go through and talk to you through the spirit box and give you an answer to what you're talking about. Or if you're completely ignoring it and you're having a conversation in another room and all of a sudden a voice comes through and kind of adds to the conversation, that's intelligence. That means it can comprehend what's going on. It can see, probably hear, and everything. And the entities are a lot more interactive with you. They know what's going on. They're happy to interact. Sometimes they're not happy to interact. Sometimes they just want to be left alone. And they want basically everybody out of their territory, which, sometimes that happens. Very rare, but it does happen. So that's intelligent. And demonic, of course, you get demonic. Demonic is on the other side of the paranormal. It's more of a I'm going to hurt you type haunt. Something's trying to scare, deprive people of sleep, grind them down to the point where it can take control of you. A lot of the time, it's more of a scary haunt. Physical harm may happen, scratches, bite marks, burns, stuff like that. I've experienced all that. And the more you delve into it, the more you figure out what it is, the more you find out that this thing's very negative in nature. And it's not just an entity that just wants you out. It's an entity that wants to do harm to the people it's haunting. It wants to maybe possibly possess them. In certain very rare occasions, there's sexual things that happen with these things, physical contact sexually. And it's a bad situation. I mean, on the worst types of demonic haunts, you get people that get possessed and stuff like that. And then you got to call on a priest, find a priest that actually will do a clearing in the house, not only a clearing in the house, but also do an exorcism. And that's very difficult. All right. Okay. So I'm going to skip a couple of these because we'll talk about these later. Somebody asked me about vampires and zombies, but I think this podcast is getting a little long. So we'll talk about that next Monday. All right. So skeptics and believers don't get along. That is really not true. I love nothing more than a good skeptic. The reason I like skeptical people is because they keep us honest. We were trained as a top family member team, and the first thing they told us is you need to learn to debunk everything. Prove what it isn't first. And then if you're left with something that you can't explain, then yeah, maybe it's paranormal or ghosts or whatever you want to call it. So even though I have that outlook on the paranormal, I've never seen a dog man. I don't know if they're real or not. I think that maybe it could be a Bigfoot being mistaken. I've seen Bigfoot, so I know they're real, but there's other entities out there that I don't know if they're real or not. Of course, ghosts and demons and all that stuff I've experienced myself, so I know those are real as well. But as I always say, you have to have an encounter where you can say that wasn't anything else but, and you can put whatever you want in there: ghosts, UFO, dogman, Bigfoot, a lake monster, whatever. You have to have your own experience. So, like I said, I love taking skeptics into places that I know are actively haunted. And by actively haunted, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happens, and I know they're probably going to have an experience. Doesn't happen every time. I mean, we have about a 50-50 ratio where sometimes we go into locations and there's just absolutely nothing happening. And this is said to be one of the most haunted places in Texas. Other times you go into these places and it's like, holy crap. Oh my God, did you hear that? Excuse my language. Oh my gosh, did you hear that? What was that? And you're constantly just like looking around the room, trying to figure out what's going on. And you're just experiencing all this stuff. And I always love it when a skeptic becomes a believer. Matt, I think I believe now. I've seen enough, so something's going on. And there's something freezing cold standing behind me. Maybe one of the entities in the room. Hello. Do you have something to add? I haven't forgotten about you guys. I promised them I would do a session where I basically left the mic on with recording audio on the WavePad editor and would do like a EVP session that way. So I could immediately go back and listen to the answers to any questions I ask and see if there's anything there. So as we've done these podcasts, we've gotten a lot of EVPs. So as I'm going through, I'm like, oh, there's another one. Pull that out, clip it, pull it out of the podcast. Now I'm just leaving them in. And if you guys hear them, you can hear them. But anyways, okay. Somebody asked me what would I recommend before I go ghost hunting. Well, the first thing I would recommend is that you have some kind of protection, be it mental protection where you just think that nothing can harm me, nothing can touch me, whatever. You can bless yourself with holy water. You can sage yourself before. Some people like to sage themselves before they go into a location and after they come out. You can basically clearly state out loud when you get to the location, I want interaction with you, but I don't want you to touch me or anything like that. So, and then basically at the end, you can do the same thing. We always clear ourselves at the end of an investigation. When we leave, when we're doing a ghost hunting investigation, man and I get in the car, get the car started, get halfway down the road. If there's anything with us, you can't come home with us. Halfway home, same thing. When we get here, if there's anybody with us, unless I invited you to come home with me, which I don't ever really do, every once in a while. Um, if there's anybody with us, you can't stay. You need to go back to wherever you came from, but you're not allowed to do anything. If it's a nasty case, we tell it to go somewhere else. But other things, you don't need a lot of gear when you start ghost hunting. If you have a good cell phone, you've got a good audio recorder, you've got a good video camera, you've got something that takes pictures. One thing I'd recommend is when you go into locations, and man, have I been doing this a lot lately, especially with that old jail, because all of our equipment kept getting messed with. And that's what happens sometimes on intelligent haunts. They will manipulate your devices. They can turn your video cameras off. They can turn your audio recorders off. You can have your audio recorder recording, turn it off, after it saves, get home, and there's no audio. And that's happened a lot lately too. But if you go through and all you really need is a cell phone, go through and just start walking into haunted locations with permission, and maybe stay the night in a haunted hotel. Go check it out. See what you experience. Have your phone charged and ready to go. And as you're going through, ask questions as you're walking through. Just ask out loud. Is there anybody with us? Give it 20, 30 seconds to respond. And then ask another question. And then at the end of the night, what I'd recommend before you go to bed, this is something I do as well. If I'm staying in a location, listen, I would love to experience you, but I got to go to sleep now. So if you want to do something that will not hopefully wake us up. You're welcome to, move something, whatever, because we normally have cameras on us as we sleep, which is a whole nother thing. But so, yeah, I mean, that's something I'd recommend. Go check out haunted locations. It doesn't have to be a hotel. You can go walk through a cemetery. I'd recommend you do it during the day. The cemeteries at night, they tend to change their skins, and it goes from a pleasant place where people are buried to other things show up and will try and manipulate you into thinking they're just a ghost. And then next thing you know, you get home and things start to happen that you're unhappy with. And sometimes it gets negative as well. So just be careful if you go into a location, you just don't feel comfortable there, then clear yourself, get in your car, get started, get down the road, clear yourself, and go home. Go somewhere else. There's different levels of hauntings, and there's different levels of paranormal activity. Some places have more activity than others. You might just walk into a location, maybe you're staying the night somewhere in some hotel, and you're asleep, and all of a sudden you wake up to some kind of noise, and then you see a shadow go by down in the other room or whatever, down by where the bathroom is. This has happened to me multiple times. I see a lot of shadow activity at hotels when I'm trying to sleep. So it may not be a location I'm at to do ghost hunting. So I grab my phone and I kind of try and document it. And then maybe I do an EVP session, ask them what they want. Are they okay? How can I help them? And if I get any responses I can understand, I'll play the video back, and then try and help them cross over. People don't realize a lot of traumas happen in hotels. People commit suicide. They accidentally hurt themselves to the point where they perish. Sometimes people get robbed in hotels. I don't want to say the R word, but people do bad things to each other. Let's just put it that way, in hotels. And that energy gets left there. Sometimes the person that is violently attacked doesn't always leave, physically leave. And so now they've got unfinished business, and they want justice. So, I mean, you can go onto boats, ships, like old haunted warships. A lot of them have energy to them. Sometimes you'll hear like things still moving, like engine parts still clicking and moving. The Queen Mary is a good example of that. The Queen Mary's when you're down in an engine room, you can still sometimes hear the engines being run and all kinds of other cool stuff. And that's more of like a residual energy, but still, it is interesting. So, other things I would recommend before you start ghost hunting, maybe go out with another team and kind of learn their techniques. So that's what we did. Our first 3 investigations where we went out with the TOPS family member teams from San Diego and Los Angeles. And then they came on 3 investigations with us and helped us. And then we kind of moved on from there. And then next thing I know, we turned into this huge group in California and we went crazy. So that was fun. And a lot of cool experiences with that. I'm not going to go back into history, but so yeah, I mean, if you find other like-minded individuals to go with you, I would recommend you don't really go alone unless you have to. Be careful. Use your own common sense. Don't go into places where you're going to could get in trouble. Don't trespass. Don't do things that it's going to make the rest of us look bad, because when there's one bad apple, unfortunately, it shines on the rest of us. So always be respectful to anybody that owns the place. Be respectful to the spirits themselves, because you don't know who you're talking to. You just don't. Demons a lot of the time will act like they're humans. They'll interact with you like humans, and then all of a sudden things will change and you're like, oh, wait a minute. So yeah, I mean, just take your time, have fun doing it. And like I said, for God's sake, clear yourself after investigations. Tell whatever is with you, even if you don't think there's anything. I don't care if you're a skeptic, clear yourself, because I've had more skeptics become believers after they've left investigations. Oh, we didn't experience anything, blah, 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 blah. And they get home and all of a sudden the door opens in front of them, or the closet, the pantry door flies open, or something flies off a shelf, or they see an apparition, or they start getting messed with while they try and sleep. And that's just bad news. You don't want that. So my main thing would just be careful, do your research before you go, know the history of a location and stuff like that. So that's where I'm going to end. You guys have a great day. Thank you guys for listening. Please, if you're on our YouTube channel, like and subscribe. We appreciate your support, and we'll catch you on the next one.